Tenho o prazer aqui de convidar para fazer uma palestra que eu tenho certeza que vai ser muito interessante, o Dr. Daniel Serralde, presidente do Conselho de Educação Econômica do Texas e ex-coordenador de Educação Econômica do William J. O'Neill para Mercados Globais e Liberdade, Escola de Negócios Cox, Universidade Metodista do Sul, em Dallas. O Dr. Serralde desenvolveu o programa de ensino livre para empresas de grande sucesso, do qual é coautor de mais de 40 horas de currículo. Ele está envolvido na promoção de políticas e práticas educacionais destinadas a promover o desenvolvimento econômico em países onde as desvantagens sociais e a pobreza podem funcionar como um trampolim para o extremismo. Ele obteve um mestrado, aliás, em liderança educacional na Universidade do Norte do Texas e fez estudos avançados no Instituto de Estudos Econômicos e Políticos de Cambridge e na Universidade Ibero-Americana na Cidade do México. Participa também como palestrante em vários painéis e conferências nos Estados Unidos e na América Latina. Então, vamos receber o professor Daniel Serralde.
Good evening, everyone. Dear participants to the third Mackenzie Forum on Economic Freedom, guests, friends of liberty. My name is Daniel Serralde, and I think we should be talking and teaching more about socialism. You heard me right. We should be talking and learning and teaching more about socialism because we have a mandate to expand liberty, a mandate to expand freedom in our communities. We are in the trenches in the fight to bring hearts and minds to the ever brightest light of human dignity. Human dignity can only be achieved when we are truly free, when we are free to trade, free to exchange, free to think, free to talk, free to disagree. Let me tell you my story. I knew I wanted to be an economist since I was 9 years old. Yeah, that much of a nerd I am. Yeah, a crazy economist, right? I grew up at a crossroads for trade and exchange, a crossroads for immigration, a crossroads between the rule of law and lawlessness. I'm talking that I grew up in the border town of Tijuana, Mexico. Right across the wall between the United States and Mexico, the wall that has caused so much ink and words to be spilled about what separates us, about what makes us different. Mexico ranked 76 in the, oh, there's Tijuana. Wrong slide. There we go. Mexico ranked 76 in the Economic Freedom of the World Index, and is characterized by a centralized, large government with excessive regulation, poor rule of law, and large unions. The United States, ranking at number 5, is known for less regulation, somewhat, high rule of law, and for being the American experiment in freedom and liberty. And there I was, 9 years old, seeing how friends' families were engaged in trade. It's a border town. Of course we're going to be trading. I met an economist, thanks to a neighborhood friend, whose uncle was an economist. Her father would host regular dinners at their home to bring in smart and successful people so us youngsters could emulate them. A few years later, in 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement came into force. Also, in 1994, we faced a sizable monetary correction in Mexico. The central bank devalued our currency, the peso, and then decided to float it. In 2 years, we reached a 52% inflation rate. Our currency depreciated 70% against the dollar. For a border town that focuses on trade, the situation was dire. we were in recession. And I was fascinated. Why do recessions happen? Who makes these decisions? How did we end up here? How do we know this is happening? How is this measured? I'm sure Professor Ulises has a little bit more indication about how recessions are measured. What choices do politicians who have an incentive to stay in power face to make these decisions with such broad and far-reaching ramifications to millions of families? What decisions do these politicians face? I fell in love with the profession. I kept growing up, trying to understand what the standard was. Who were the great thinkers of economics? Who were the great thinkers of political economy, of philosophy? How could I emulate them? How could I understand their ideas? How could I expand my brain? As I entered high school, I began to read John Maynard Keynes. He was a great economist, right? He built the financial system on which the world was running. He made a coalition to rebuild Europe after World War II. He was a great one, right? His ideas took hold of me. Big government, fiscal intervention, stimulus, tax more, spend more. Of course, an elite class of intelligentsia was able to pull the levers just right, have balance, have the right choices, provide growth, and they were the heroes. Of course, I wanted to be one. These ideas took me down the slippery road of arrogance. I was smart, or so I thought. Of course, I knew what was best for people. Of course, if only the right person could be put in power, we could all be all right. Poverty would be eradicated. Everything would be unicorns, rainbows, and free popcorn for everyone. Then these guys came along. They said, "Hello. Of course you know more than everyone else." Especially the one in the middle that's lying down, right? Of course you know more than everyone else. You can centrally plan everything. Why stop at stimuli? You can help the proletariat take over the means of production. Everyone will now have access to the means of production. Unicorns, rainbows, and free popcorn for everyone. Utopia. With him came a whole lifestyle, an entire look. The full package. My teenage identity problem was now solved. I only had to buy, of course, from the correct, licensed, authorized vendor, the kit, the proper training, and start organizing workers. I was much thinner back then. This is a second copy, a bigger size. As you can see, even communists like trade. Look at those prices to get the officially licensed supreme proletariat uniform. Alas, at that point I was in the United Kingdom, studying in Cambridge, how to transition the welfare states, the mixed economies, into socialist utopias. I had my mission clear, to denounce capitalism so we could expand socialism, which would ultimately bring communism to our nations. Unicorns, rainbows, and free popcorn for everyone. I only had to talk and teach more about socialism. The workers of the world would unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Why were we in the situation of poverty? Why are nations poor? Why are some countries rich? All of these questions could be solved by one simple explanation. We are the victims. We are being exploited. It's the evil imperialist capitalist pigs that come and tell us how to follow their recipes, the recipes of failure, since these policies are one-sided, with only one thing in mind: increase their wealth and profit at any cost. I was going to be a revolutionary fighter that was going to stop that. Or so I thought. We all have our hearts and we all have our relationships. And I had left a girlfriend back home. And throughout my time in the UK, we would send each other letters. I don't know if some of you young people, you actually used to write in paper and use something called the post office back then. So we would send each other love letters. We would call each other. Long distance was very expensive back then. And she said she missed me. And I missed her so much. I had to go back to her. So I made a mistake, or so it seems at first glance. I left the United Kingdom and enrolled in a university in the United States, not that different from Mackenzie. Point Loma Nazarene University. Why would it matter where I graduated from? I was going to be a revolutionary. Titles don't matter. I am one of the proletariat. If I am in the trenches, talking, teaching to the workers about socialism, organizing them into unions so they could overthrow their masters. By the way, she dumped me 3 months after I came back to the US, but that's another story. By now, my intellectual curiosity was taking me down a compelling path. I was asking questions like, why do people vote one way? Why, even against their self-interest, do workers vote for exploitative policies? Why do politicians lose their minds when they get elected? I was interested in social psychology. How do groups perceive reality? How could I convince them to vote one way or another? Little by little, I became a political consultant. I had a mission to help elect the right human beings, the righteous ones that would care about workers and socialist ideas, the pure ones, the chosen ones. I ended up training in Cuba, how to market, how to sell these ideas, how to organize, how to support campaigns, how to sell the road to surf them as a scenic highway. When socialists are faced with the failings of past experiments, there is always a simple answer that they give. I'm sure we've all heard it. That was not real socialism. That was not real communism. Just give us a chance, and we will bring paradise to earth. Unicorns, candy, rainbows, and free popcorn for everyone. There were a lot of simple answers to hide the failings. We only had to find the right people, the chosen ones. El hombre nuevo. I worked to help elect Lula, I apologize, re-elect Chavez, elect Evo, repackage Farabundo Martí, and being Mexican, help elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador as the mayor of Mexico City. Help him govern even. The more of these individuals I helped elect, the more disillusioned I became with how, once in power, they forgot about the poor. They forgot about the workers. They forgot about the people that they set out initially to help. They just kept governing for their cronies. They would centralize all control, centralize all decision-making, and have all the choices to themselves and their close circle. They would rule to enrich themselves. Actual picture. At that time, I met who would become my former wife. Traveling 28 days out of the month was not a good idea to start a relationship. It was not a good idea to start a family when I was traveling 28 days out of the month. So I sold my shares in the political consulting firm that I was a part of. I moved to San Diego, California. I bought a house. I bought a business, and I was now an entrepreneur. I was a businessman. I was a wholesale importer of flowers, bringing them in from Mexico, Canada, Ecuador, Colombia, Kenya, Thailand, and Holland. I was paying my taxes, minding fiscal regulation. Everything was going to be okay, right? And then the recession hit in 2009. And during that recession, that was especially harsh in Southern California, the state legislature had the brilliant idea of helping the environment. We all love the environment, right? We all love cleaner air. What's wrong with that? Let's regulate cleaner air through excessive regulation, of course we can have cleaner air, right? Well, unfortunately, I was on the losing side of this argument. I had 5 refrigerated trucks, and they ran on diesel engines. One for the truck, and one for the refrigeration unit. 10 engines. So that meant I had to buy 10 catalytic converters that the kind crony donors of the legislature had the exclusive rights to sell in the state of California. Each converter was $5,000. So I had to spend $50,000 to have cleaner air for the state of California. Fantastic. Well, for a small business owner in the middle of the recession, it was enough to drive me into bankruptcy. I lost everything. I was effectively regulated out of business. I was now the victim of my worldviews. But still, I didn't learn. Hard-headed. I applied to 400 jobs throughout California. I had 10 callbacks, 2 interviews, but yet no job. So I went back to do what I used to do before. So I ran a couple of gubernatorial races for state governments in Mexico. And when we won the last of those 2, the gentleman that I helped get elected admitted to us on election night that he had no idea what a governor did. Sounds familiar. That he did this for his ego, to show to himself that he could do it. He could just be governor, for the hell of it. It was the perfect opportunity to see my ideas come to life. I helped him form a government. And I took the challenge to draft policy regarding poverty and agriculture. My ambitious goal was to lift 80% of the poor out of their situation. With the right subsidies, the right market interventions, this would be a platform to ultimately bring about agrarian reform and establish a pathway to workers owning the means of production. I decided to go and seek out with the help of the CEPAL, which I hear y'all are not too big fans around here, in Santiago de Chile, what the best poverty mitigation programs in the world were, what agrarian stimuli had worked, and ultimately, I believed that now I had the chance to pull the levers just in the right way. I was now part of the chosen. This trip took me to Argentina, Botswana, Vietnam, China, Nicaragua, with a stop at the Foro Social de Porto Alegre. As I went back to debrief in Santiago, I noticed something. This is Santiago in the 1930s. This is Santiago a couple of years ago. This city was different. This country was different. I mean, they looked like Mexico. They had the same language, the same heritage. The imperialist Spaniards had colonized them. They had mestizaje. They were Catholic. They had the same history. In the words of Galeano, they had the same curse. But their poor were different than the poor in Mexico. There was an air of hope. There was an air that entrepreneurship could be the road out of poverty. I asked Alicia Bárcena at the CEPAL why this was the case over there. Why was Chile so different? So she called Dr. Cas Sommerhoff, the Minister of Planning and Social Development of Chile, and I was sent to his office. He called his aides, and they gave me an explanation about the Chilean economy, how their social development and poverty alleviation programs are different, how they viewed poverty, how they viewed the world. I was surprised. This was what I was looking for, but it was completely different. As I went back to Dr. Kost's office, I asked him, what great central planning economist was their hero? Who was this wizard that pulled the levers? He was my new hero. He simply responded, el mercado. I asked, Dr. Mercado? Mr. Mercado? Doctora Mercado? Mrs. Mercado? Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, Sorbonne? He said, no, el libre mercado. I laughed nervously. This was wrong. He handed me his business card with a note and told me to go downstairs to the tiny bookshop they had in the building and to give this card to the attendant. I said my goodbyes, and I went to the bookshop. There I was handed a book, this book. I opened it, and I saw the first pages, and I saw this. He was talking to me. On the plane back to Mexico, I began reading, and I kept reading and reading. And I began to cry. I wept like a baby. How could I be so wrong? How could my good intentions, how could my good ideas be so catastrophic and destructive to my fellow humans? How could I be hurting the ones I was supposed to help? I repented. I committed myself to righting the wrongs that I had sowed in so many places. At the end of the day, I still had intellectual honesty. I had to do things right. I had to admit my mistakes. So I went back and I wrote a free market, liberty, entrepreneurial-focused plan to invigorate the economy, to restrict regulation and to make people free. It was quickly shelved, and I was asked to leave. Jobless, broke, again here I was, this time with a wife, 2 kids, and 2 dogs. So we packed up and decided to come back to the United States. While heading north, we were faced with a choice. Go back to California or try something new. My sister and my brother, it's 3 of us, had moved to Texas and absolutely loved it. And they kept telling me that I would love Texas. So we decided to give it a try. I had never been in Dallas, but we moved to Dallas. I had to start fresh. I had to start new. As soon as I got to Dallas, I began applying for jobs. Any job. I applied for 20 positions the first day. The next day, I had 10 callbacks. 5 interviews were scheduled. In 3 days, I had 2 offers. I took the first one. And now I was a school bus driver for Plano ISD. I was starting fresh. I was starting new. The job was well paid. It gave me plenty of downtime to read, so I read. I reread all of the authors that I had read critically in my youth. I read Mises, Friedman, Hayek, Adam Smith, Bastiat, etc., etc. And I read everything this time with humility. I was reading to learn. After carrying around Human Action for a few weeks, my dispatcher asked why I was reading that dictionary. I said that I was an economist and had done a few things in my life, and that I was rereading some of the good old classics. She told me if I had considered teaching. Me? A teacher? Of what? Well, economics. Aren't you an economist? So, I decided to be a teacher of economics in high school. I liked the idea, so I went and got certified by the state of Texas. I got a job as a teacher the next school year. It was my turn to change hearts and minds. I ended up teaching in the largest high school in the state of Texas. 6,600 students. It was Duncanville High School. Every passing period, it's like a little town. 6,000 people just walking. An insane amount of teenagers to have housed in one building. Most of the students in that high school were in poverty. And I was there, right in front of them, teaching them about markets, entrepreneurship, and Spanish, because I got assigned Spanish too. And I was trying to teach any entrepreneurship, both as a leader in business, but also on being entrepreneurial in their own jobs. How to find efficiencies, how to create value, even if they were cooking hamburgers, how to make things better, how to serve one another. In whatever place they were, they could be entrepreneurial. I began to seek more opportunities, and the education system in the United States and everywhere around the world doesn't provide much. In fact, being here in my soapbox, I can say, what happens to the best teachers? How do they get promoted in the education system? They get taken out of the classroom to become administrators. That's a system and an incentive structure that attacks the very principles of education. That's why we need education reform. So, in order to keep growing, I decided to become a school administrator, a bureaucrat. I could use my skills to generate change from within, or so I thought. As the school year came to a close, I got a call from a headhunter asking me if I would be interested in working to advance free market ideas at a grassroots level and as a leader in the Latin American community in Texas. I was being recruited to work for the Libre initiative. I took the job and began my work as a community organizer, helping bring free market ideas to the community. I was generating change from the ground up. It was a fantastic time. I didn't know at that moment how much my life was about to change. A donor had an idea, and he wanted to improve economic education. Southern Methodist University's O'Neill Center for Global Markets and Freedom approached me with a good problem. They had money to change economic education. I was an economist and an educator. I had my mission to advance free market ideas. So yes, pick me, pick me. So I took the challenge, and this became of it. I began to write curricula about how to teach economics in an engaging way for students to learn it, how to translate Hayek, Mises, and all my heroes into teachable moments so I could then train teachers on how to do this. In 3 years, we achieved 23 curriculum books. This is just a small sample, with units on entrepreneurship, morality of markets, sports economics, creative destruction, property rights, culture and trade, the Austrian school, sweatshops, development economics, health economics, short-run macroeconomics, and the list goes on and on. In 3 years, we reached our goal of teaching over 3,000 teachers on how to teach all of this in their classroom. It was extremely satisfying work. I had the chance to hang out with brilliant economists, co-author with them, and train teachers about how to improve their skills and activities to teach economics, changing the narrative of the dirty entrepreneur into the hero's journey of the entrepreneur. I developed classroom activities, so all of these ideas came to life. Doing active experiments in the classroom with students moving around and exchanging and doing thought experiments as well, so students could feel, so students could touch, so students could even taste economics. We were making economics real to them, helping students think like an economist. Now, why should this story matter to you? I want to share with you that this should matter to you because discussing and teaching about socialism and communism makes us better. And it allows us the opportunity to approach our friends and family with something they already know. In our countries, we have been trained to be collectivist, to bring about the greater good for society. That's what the education system is based on in Latin America. We must be patient, and we must be generous with our adversaries. They are not our enemies. Nigel brought up the point in his earlier talk that they mostly are not evil people. We both want the same outcome. We both want the same vision. We all want to eradicate poverty. Poverty is a natural state of humanity. It is free markets that free us, though, and it is capitalism that helps us rise out of poverty. We must counter their sometimes hateful speech and their aggressiveness with love. We must love our adversaries. It is also in our faith. What patterns are there between our adversaries and us? What do we share? We share an interest in making the world a better place. Most of us want our world to be better after we are gone. We want to leave a better place for our generations to grow up in. That's why we should teach more about socialism. And we should talk about these ideas and how they fail, how they dramatically fail. Don't let the easy answer slide. It's not true that real communism hasn't been implemented. It has. Socialism kills. This is what it brings. This is what communism does. How many millions of our fellow human beings have died because of these failed ideas? We have some friends here in our continent that are suffering because of these ideas. Right now, today, things like this are happening over and over in Venezuela. Socialism, in fact, works so well that they have to build walls to keep people in. Yet this is how, after this chain of failure after failure, we are seeing people react. This is what we're now seeing in cities around the world. This one is here in Sao Paulo a couple of years ago. Why are these ideas refusing to go into the dark corners of history? Well, socialism is sexy. By the way, that's the t-shirt I have. Socialism is sexy. The chart is a little bit small, but through sizable racial and ethnic, age, gender, and income differences in the view of socialism and capitalism by the Pew Research Center, we can see that in ages 18 to 29, socialism has a very positive view. Capitalism has more or less the same positive view, but socialism increases with minorities in the United States as a favorable ideology. Half of Democratic women and fewer than half of Democrats, when polled, with people under 30, express positive views of capitalism. Capitalism ain't sexy anymore. Capitalism is not being viewed favorably by our youth. Fidel Castro said in 2003 that we should keep doing what we do, where we do it. That in front of the sophisticated weapons of capitalism and free markets that want to submit us to their will, that the destruction behind capitalism brings about an economic and social order that is unfair, irrational, and unsustainable. We must plant ideas, and plant ideas. So conscience, and so conscience. I think he is right. We must plant the right ideas, the shiny beacon on the hill, liberty and freedom, human dignity, free trade, economic liberty. This is what we need to plant in the hearts and minds. And we must combat their ideas of hatred and jealousy with love. Love for one another, passion for entrepreneurship, the generation of value for one another, voluntary exchange. Less Marx, more Mises. I know I am standing in front of the next generation of Brazilian fighters, of Brazilian teachers, of Brazilian liberals, of Brazilian lawyers, intellectuals, politicians, doctors, nurses, entrepreneurs in business, and in whatever career you might end up. Our ideas are the right ones. There is a curious overlap between economic freedom and welfare and human dignity. This is the Mackenzie Index on state economic freedom. That when we start seeing in what states here in Brazil are freer, I'm sure we can find correlations with standard of living, with income, with job conditions, with the market, and just in general, with human dignity and welfare in these states. It has been proven time and time again that wherever there's economic freedom, there is human flourishing. Now imagine what we can achieve if we take this tide and we twist it, we overturn it. If we always and everywhere are teaching free enterprise, if we are always and constantly teaching entrepreneurship about the morality of markets, if we are continually talking about socialism and its failures, and if we are bringing light into the darkness of servitude. One person changed me, and it was compassion and a kind heart that opened my eyes to see the reality of how free markets do work, on how economic freedom looks like in action, on how it frees human potential, about how economic freedom brings about human dignity, and it is achieved. That is what we all want. I want to challenge you to be that person. Be that person for someone. Did you know that in Hollywood films, you have 70 times more probabilities of being killed by an entrepreneur than by a terrorist? Just think over and over and over again how entrepreneurs are being portrayed in media. James Bond has always been chased by some evil entrepreneur. And think about the villains. It's always entrepreneurs. There's something wrong in that. Why do we vilify the entrepreneurs? They should be our everyday heroes. From the street vendor out here selling popcorn to the leader of a multinational corporation that employs hundreds of thousands of workers and brings value to their families. If people are willing to freely exchange their hard-earned money for their goods and services, they are generating value. What can you do to change this? You can learn, you can read, teach, 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 teach. Talk about it. Post it on social media. Do your own research. And find a way to thank our everyday heroes. Love each other. Be respectful to our adversaries. Talk to them. Teach them. Learn from them. Be patient. Be very patient. The world is changed one heart at a time. And I know in my case, it worked. Thank you very much. May the blessings of freedom and liberty be strengthened in Brazil. Obrigado. Questions?
Bem, temos um tempo ainda para algumas perguntas. Não sei se o público quer fazer alguma pergunta ao professor Serralde. Eu tenho uma, mas eu vou esperar vocês também terem a oportunidade de fazer. Alguém se habilita? Não? Eu vou falar em português. Com a sua experiência e conhecendo os países, qual a sua interpretação? Porque a gente estava vendo os países com... E é verdade, nós aqui no Centro de Liberdade fizemos vários estudos que mostram a relação entre liberdade econômica e padrão de vida, PIB, GDP. Então, considerando a sua experiência, como o senhor explica o que está ocorrendo nesse momento no Chile, que é um país sabidamente com um alto grau de liberdade econômica e também de qualidade de padrão de vida?
Well, in Chile, what has been happening now is a very worrying situation. Even though it's the shining beacon in Latin America, the most economically free country in Latin America, there has been a situation in which there has been excessive, because of lack of financial literacy and lack of economic education, there has been excessive indebtedness by households. So that has caused an emotional crisis within a lot of Chilean families that has been the ripe ground, so that any candidate, any politician that starts saying, oh, we'll just delete the credit bureau. There was a candidate, I believe, here, right, that was saying, we'll just get rid of the credit bureau. We'll just eliminate everybody's debt. Well, with all of this angst, there's obviously politicians, and there are other countries that are supporting populist, socialist politicians. And in a very, in fact, with the Metro in Santiago attacks, it was very interesting to see how they happened all at the same time, and all of them happened in a coordinated fashion. That doesn't sound like it's an angry mob. It sounds far more systemic. Of course, I'm not there on the ground or have the adequate intelligence to say who or what or where this happened, but it does seem extremely suspicious. Chile, for a long time, has been a symbol both to us as liberals, but also a symbol to the left, about how Chile is different from the rest of Latin America. So I do believe that the situation in Chile is very dangerous politically. The ideas of freedom are under attack in Chile, and I really hope that the left does not succeed in destroying the Chilean experiment.
Alguma outra pergunta? Bem, então, em nome da Universidade Mackenzie, do Centro de Liberdade Econômica, quero agradecer sua presença aqui, é uma honra conhecê-lo.